tyranny emerges when normal, honest people are now afraid to say what they think. And when the tyranny is complete in a totalitarian state, no one ever says what they think about anything. Everyone lies all the time. And I see part of the pathway to that, the unwillingness of ordinary people to take the consequences of their truthful speech. And I also think that's detrimental to them, because I think that you find the adventure in your life. I think this is certainly true of you. You find the adventure in your life by standing behind your words. Like, that's you, right? Those are your words. If you're telling the truth, that's actually you. And there's going to be consequences. And sometimes they're going to be negative. But do you really think that the consequences of telling the truth in your own voice are negative? You think the world's structured like that? Jesus, that's a dismal view, man.
Well, it depends on the amount of autonomy you have. It depends on the amount of resources you have.
Yeah.
I mean, let's take, for example, nurses. Nurses who had contracted COVID during the pandemic and had developed natural immunity. There was already studies that showed that natural immunity was superior to the immunity that was imparted by the vaccine, but yet they were being mandated to take this vaccine.
Yeah.
And a lot of them had some serious apprehensions about it that were logical, based on people that they knew that had adverse reactions. And now we're finding out more and more how common those adverse reactions were. Now, if these women stepped up, or these men who are nurses stepped up and said something about it publicly, they would be fired.
Yeah, well, look, when I was working as a clinician, I had lots of clients who were in that position. They're at work, and they're being tyrannized by sometimes it was DEI types, and sometimes it was
DEI?
Diversity, inclusivity, and equity.
Oh.
The woke ideologues who were coming for them and not letting them say what they wanted to say politically. And sometimes they were just being tyrannized by garden variety narcissists. Their bosses were that sort.
Yeah.
And it was crushing them. And, it's easy to say to people like that, well, just stand up to your boss, but they often were rather constrained in their employment opportunities, and they had families. And so you can't tell people, well, just go shoot off your mouth stupidly, get fired and taken out and mobbed and let your family starve. That's a pretty dumb strategy. But what we would always do in the therapeutic endeavor with someone in a situation like that was to situate themselves in their life so that they could afford to abide by their own truth. And so that might mean if you're in a job, let's say, where you don't have freedom of expression, you get your resume or your CV polished up so that if necessary, you could make a lateral move relatively quickly. Maybe you send out some job applications just to test the market. And if you're not marketable, maybe you pop up your skills. And then maybe if you're in a position where you're vulnerable because someone else has got control over your tongue, maybe you work real hard to put some other ground under your feet so that you can't be taken out so easily. Like when I opposed the Bill C-16 in Canada, the mandatory pronoun bill, I knew that would cause a psychological epidemic. I told the Senate that back in 2017. I said, you guys don't know what you're doing here. You're going to confuse a lot of adolescent young women, and for every girl you hypothetically save who has body dysmorphia, and that'll be a vanishingly small number of people who are actually saved, you're going to doom like 300. Of course, that's exactly what's happened. That's why the Tavistock Clinic shut down in the UK, and so there was that. But I also had set myself up, because I had 3 streams of income. I had my university salary, I had a clinical practice, and I had a business. And that wasn't accidental. I knew from my clinical practice that if you wanted to say what you had to say, you had to put yourself in a position where you couldn't be easily taken out by the mob or the tyrant. And then I would say, well, if you're not in a position where you can afford to say what you have to say, then that's an indication that you haven't positioned yourself optimally existentially, you haven't positioned yourself optimally in life. Your foundation is too weak. And so, maybe it'll take you 3 years to fix that, so that now you're grounded firmly so that a casual objection from your boss or even being fired isn't going to take you out. It's not like that's easy. But abiding by the truth isn't easy. The only thing, but it's a lot more preferable than abiding by falsehood. That's the problem, right? Of course, abiding by the truth isn't easy, obviously. But, what sort of devil do you let into your head if you abide by falsehood? And some of that might be just not saying what you have to say. And that's not just, Mostly we regard sins of commission as more egregious than sins of omission. An outright lie is worse than just failure to say what you know to be the truth. But when enough people are silent about things they know they have something to say about, then you have a tyranny. And so, well, we haven't sorted through all this, very well in our society, but I think it's morally incumbent on all of us to set up our lives so that we can afford to tell the truth. And if you can't, well, then you think, no, you haven't got the hatches battened down, right? The walls of your towers, your fort aren't high enough. You're not properly armed. And you should be, because the mob's coming for you. And so is the chaos of nature. And you bloody well better be prepared. And so I think if you're anonymous, you're depriving yourself of the necessity to put yourself in a position where you can tell the truth. Now, think about what happened to you. Now, you tell me what you think about this. I mean, I've been watching you for a long time, and it's quite remarkable seeing the impact that you've had that keeps increasing across time. But my experience with you is that, you have your opinions, your perspective, and you'll put them forward. But mostly what you do is you ask people questions that you actually have as questions, right? As far as I can tell, you're mostly trying to figure out what the hell's going on. And so that's honest. It's honest exposition. It honestly exposes your own ignorance as well. And, you can take the audience along as a consequence of that. And for you, the consequence has been, you've gone from just doing this podcast, sort of a side thing for you, at least when it started, to being, I don't know if there's anybody who has more impact as a single individual on the media environment worldwide than you do. And that's all a consequence of actually truthfully admitting your own ignorance and saying what you had to say. And I know you were set up to do that because you had multiple streams of income, and you couldn't easily be taken out. You'd already accomplished things in a multitude of spheres. But think of the consequence of that. You think, well, would that happen to anybody who did everything they could to ask stupid questions and tell the truth? The answer is maybe. So you don't do that. You hide and you have your reasons. Your family's at risk. It's like, fair enough, man. But you deprive yourself of the great adventure of your life, and you contribute by remaining silent to pathologization of the whole society. So, well, that doesn't seem like a very good route to me.